All right. And I'm recording it and I'll put it on my YouTube. So, hey, everyone, thanks so much for hopping on. If you're new to like this type of, well, Zoom, there's one person on live. You can ask questions. We can't see you, but you can ask questions in the chat area. And then I'll be kind of checking the Facebook group to see if you guys have any questions. Just FYI, in the group in the file section is where you're going to find all your meal plans, all your free workouts, anything that I recommend. So today I recommend, honestly, like this book is even so great for like nutrition. You know, I read this book, Brittney, right? This
Yes,
book is
yes.
so good. And that's like a lot of the tips and info that I gave today really came from here. So any recommendation, like today I gave magnesium calm as a supplement, all that stuff
Mhm.
is going to be in the file section. So make sure you check that out daily as we go through our group. Tomorrow, I'm pretty sure, like I'm a fly by the seat of my pants type of person, if you didn't know. But tomorrow we're going to be focused on, I think we're going to do, um, we'll do probably gut health or nutrition. And then Thursday will definitely be exercise. And then Friday is going to kind of be what I call like detoxing from your freaking life in all aspects of mind, all the toxins that are around us. I can deep dive in that, but I'm going to stay focused to sleeping. So I got Brittney on the call with us tonight. So Brittney, thank you so much for hopping on. So back before I was even pregnant, I read so many freaking sleeping books. Like Dave's like, "Are you serious? Are you reading another book?" I was like, "My kid has to sleep. Like it's a non-negotiable." Well, my kid didn't do anything that the book said. I'm like, "It's not in this one. It's not in this one. He's not following." I'm like, "I know he has to nap at 12, but he's not napping at 12." I paid for courses on baby sleeping, and I paid for two like baby
Mhm.
courses, and then I had like kind of like a sleep coach, but she would only talk to me through email. It was very weird. But I found Brittney through another coach,
Mhm.
and man, like she knew her stuff. I was like, all right, this chick is legit. And honestly, I would pay anything to get my kid to sleep. Like I run a business, right? Like I need time during the day, and he's down. Like that's it. I don't have to worry about him waking up unless like he's sick, and that's once in a blue moon. But like that's it. So let me get Brittany's stats. Give me a second. So for my personal experience, Brittney just knows her stuff. And so she does all ages of any life um, years of helping people sleep. So Brittany, she's obviously a mom of a little cute boy. And she got certified in pediatric sleep in 2017 and started her side gig. She was a high school teacher before that. And in 3.5 years, she was able to quit. She now has like this whole conglomerate of sleeping teachers. So she trained 7 other women on her team, and she's also adult sleep certified as well. And like I said, like she has helped my family tremendously. So sleep doesn't just impact, it just doesn't impact you, it
Mhm.
impacts every person in the household. I mean, I could still like go back to when he was a baby screaming. I was like a mess, and Dave's like trying to calm me. It's like, it's crazy when nobody gets sleep. So a lot of the women in the group had questions more about their own sleep. And I would say
Mhm.
a majority of their questions had to focus on um, getting to sleep. So what would you say is like the biggest problem that you see that people do before sleep that you're like, don't do that. Like, why are you doing that? So
Well, it's
Brittany, thanks
funny
for
because
hopping on. Take it away.
yeah, no problem. So it's funny that you say that, Rose, because I saw your post today about like getting your electronics out of the room. And I know it's going to be hard, but we survived all of these other decades without them. And honestly, it's the electronics. Um, it's the blue lights that's coming from them, the way it's impacting the production of melatonin, which is our sleep hormone. But I would say even more than that, especially for moms, it's what we're doing while on the device and how it's impacting our like mental and emotional state. So a lot of Instagram scrolling, right? A lot of comparing ourselves, a lot of like reading posts and feeling mom guilt. It's like a lot of good things aren't necessarily coming from the scrolling. So the scrolling itself is bad and the device is bad, but it's the thoughts that start to spiral because of the scrolling. And then you're laying there and you're like, well, I'm the world's shittiest mom, or crap, like my kid didn't eat the right foods today, or look what they're doing. They're doing this so much better than I am. And so then you get into this thought loop that triggers some anxiety and some stress. And then it's just a downhill slope.
Yeah, I don't have a TV in my room. I put my phone in my bathroom. It is hard when you have a little one and like we have the outlet.
The monitor. Yeah.
So the monitor is on my phone, but seriously,
Right.
once he was sleep trained, I didn't look at the monitor. So we have Jen who's on right now. She I think her kid's 3 years old and she's asking about the baby monitor. So I was talking to Jen before, and her issue is like she keeps waking up, like if she hears like a drop of a dime, she'll get up.
Right.
The baby monitor, she'll hear her kid like move and she'll get up. So I asked her if she had a sound machine. She says she has a humidifier. So what's your thoughts on all that?
So yeah, so for the itty bitties, like under 6, 7 months old, if they're not yet sleeping through, or if they still need a night feed, we definitely recommend keep that monitor on so you can hear it. For the older kiddos, honestly, turn it down. Turn it down. You're going to hear them if they need you. Like we just have to trust that. They're often quite loud when they protest, right? Like I know there's been a few times where Parker's been sick. Like you know that something is off. You know that he needs you in that moment, even without having the monitor right there. So Jennifer, I would recommend like turning it down, even like popping the monitor, whether it's on your phone or on just like a monitor device on the other side of the bed. So put it on your partner's side. And that way, at least if it's something that you need, you'll hear it, even though it's, across the bed, but it's not like right there that you're just like, oh, I'm just going to quick check. I'm going to check really quick. Like I just need to see what he's doing or what's going on. So I would say that in terms of the like lighter sleep and sort of that fragmented sleep that you're talking about, where she wakes like instantly, the door creaks and she's awake. Sometimes it's a hormonal imbalance of melatonin or cortisol. It could be like some adrenal fatigue. Rose, I'm sure you're going to talk more about all of these things, later in your week, but I love magnesium calm. I love it a lot. And I did want to add that oftentimes, especially for women, the magnesium can't be absorbed at the like amount that we need it to be unless we add calcium to that. So sometimes with my clients, we start with magnesium calm, and then we actually need to add a calcium supplement as well to help with the absorption. But baby monitor is a tricky one, especially because so many of them are on phones these days. But I would really encourage like turn it down. Unless you're in a monster house, you're going to hear your little one, right, when they need you.
My question with magnesium, do you think because I use a lotion one for Parker that has magnesium in it. Do you feel like that absorbs better, or it really doesn't make a difference whether it's drink or?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to matter. I also have some clients who have done it as a soak, like a salt magnesium soak in the bath. And I think it depends on like how severe your deficiency is, right? Because we can obviously ingest quite a bit more than we could rub on through a bath or through a lotion or a rub. So, getting a panel done is always a good idea to see kind of where those deficiencies fall.
Absolutely. And another thing, like even with the baby monitor, it's those like little lights on things that you don't even realize, like the lights. Like I have a humidifier, and I literally like would wrap a towel around the humidifier, and Dave's like, you just push this button and all the lights turn off. I'm like, oh. But all those like little things, like it might not seem significant, but that blue light has such an effect on your hormones and being like wide awake and you're just laying in bed. So kind of I'll go right into that. Because I know like sometimes I used to have that problem of laying in bed and you're like,
Mhm,
all right, an hour went by, 2 hours went by. Like,
mhm.
what would you tell somebody that is just sitting in bed thinking, thinking, thinking? Should they just lay in bed for like 2 hours? Should they get up, go for a walk?
Great question. So I have a few things. First, I had a client this last weekend, and guess what we determined the trigger for her was? Her light switch was illuminated. So, like the light switches that
Mm,
were installed in her house, tiny, tiny, tiny baby little light on the side of it. So you could see the light switch when it was dark. They switched their light switches out, and guess what? Her time of sleep onset is what I call it, like the amount of time it takes someone to fall asleep initially. It went from like 90 minutes averaging, and we're down to like less than 30 because of the stupid little
wow.
light on the light switch. It's wild. So yeah, check the environment for those little triggers. But in terms of the laying there with the mind racing, especially for clients who have like they're in periods of pretty extreme stress or in a season that's particularly stressful or anxiety inducing, which I would say coming out of 2020 most of us have been, right? um I really recommend some body scans for sleep, any sort of guided meditation body scan focusing on someone else's voice that isn't the one in your head. It can be super helpful. It gets tricky because of the electronics, right? Because all of these tracks, whether it's through like Insight Timer or the Calm app or Peloton has new ones out. I know Beachbody does too with the meditations. It's hard when they're playing on your phone. So I have been recommending like a little small Bluetooth speaker where your phone is still away in the bathroom and you hit play and then the speaker is near your bed. So you're able to listen to the guided body scan. The other thing, and this is quite new, but there's a product by Lofty. I think it's called Lofty Sleep. And it's like a little like device that you would set next to your bed, and it has a speaker and it has meditation tracks through it. So that's another idea. But for people who would rather not like introduce something else into their routine, and you asked about, should they just lie there? Should they get up? I always recommend getting up because lying there is just going to perpetuate that cycle that you're in of why can't I sleep? Oh my gosh, I stink at sleeping. Oh my gosh, now I only have 5 hours until my alarm goes off. Oh my gosh, what about my to-do list for tomorrow? And as you lay there, you get more and more agitated. And an agitated brain is not a rested brain. So oftentimes getting up, doing some sort of what I call a brain dump, where you would just like
Mm.
go over to a chair, have a notebook there, and just get your thoughts out of your own head onto the page can be super helpful. I really love passion flower tea, like making a nice cup of passion flower tea. Um, Actually, there's some studies out right now that show the positive impact of cherry juice, just like a half cup of cherry juice, obviously unsweetened, just like the glass jar of cherry juice that you could get at probably Whole Foods. That helps with melatonin production as well. But most often, starting with the environment, getting the lights out, getting the devices out, and then sort of working towards like the mind, quieting the mind.
And what time would you say, I know the ideal time to fall asleep so that you're in sync with your circadian rhythm? Because typically, the average is get 8 hours of sleep. That I might be off on that
Right.
one too. But if you go to bed at midnight and you wake up at 8, it's not the same as going to bed at, say, 10 and
Earlier.
waking up at
Right.
7. What's your thought on that?
So it depends. Just like with infants, right? It depends on what kind of where they sit with those wake windows, right? Where their sort of prime is. So all of our circadian clocks are different. The way that we metabolize caffeine is different. The impact of your morning or afternoon cup of coffee as compared to mine is going to make my desired sleep time different than yours. And it can be hard to sort of find that sweet spot because we're constantly changing variables. And so if you right now are someone who's trying to like hack your sleep and you just feel like something's got to give, this isn't working for me, my one recommendation would be don't change too much too quickly, because you're not giving anything enough time to actually see if there's going to be a result, right? It can't be like, oh, well, last night I put my phone away like Rose told me to, and I didn't fall asleep fast. So I'm going to just bring
That
my
didn't
phone
work.
back in my room now. Dang it. Like she doesn't even know what she's talking about. And I think, you know, we continue to get more and more and more quick fix as a society. And as we continue to drive in that direction, it's going to get harder and harder to make change, because we just expect that these things come at the drop of a hat, and they don't. Change is hard. Habits are hard. Patterns are tricky. So in finding that, like when I work with clients, we do for adults, we do between 4 and 6 weeks of like really intentional tracking, really intentional. Like I'm looking at times, I'm looking at data, I'm looking at numbers for them, because everybody's sort of sweet spot. You know, there are early birds, there are night owls, there are people where, you know, they can feel just as rested if they sleep from 10 to 3 than if they do from midnight to 8. Like the chunk of time is shorter, but the quality of sleep is higher, as opposed to going to sleep later and waking up later. And so really, you know, kind of keeping an eye on that. And the other thing with this is a lot of people will come and they'll say, oh, my Apple Watch says blah, 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 blah about my sleep. Or, oh, my Fitbit says blah, 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 blah about my sleep. And using those trackers as a part of the story, right? But not the full story. So if your Fitbit says that your sleep quality was poor, but you wake up and you feel great, let's trust what we feel over what this thing says. Because sometimes we can get really, really tied up in this predicted data, but it really is just predicted, right? We can always gauge better how we feel as compared to what something else says.
Something is telling us. Yeah. And I talked today in the group about like EMF and the electromagnetic and all that stuff, and the radiation bugs me out. I am like super crazy because like I tell Dave, like put your, because he needs his phone. He wakes up super early at 4 o'clock. So he needs his phone next to him. We tried an alarm. It didn't work. So we tried all the other things, but he puts his phone on airplane mode. That way it lowers the radiation a little bit. I don't know by how much, but with the Apple Watch thing, to me, I'm like, you're wearing something. And I'm sure if you, because on the Apple phones, it says, don't put your phone by your head. Hello. I'm sure it would say the same thing about the Apple Watch. Like, don't put it on your skin because it's gonna, because all of that just changes. You have to think like we are our body's energy, right? Having that stuff connected to you 24/7 is going to make a difference. And I'm not saying go throw out your Apple Watch. I'm just saying there's a thought.
Be mindful. Yep.
For you to think about, right? Just information to take, and if you need it, cool. If not, throw it out.
Yeah.
Cool. So we talked about magnesium calm. What are your thoughts on melatonin?
So short-term use, like I don't aren't doing this right now, but like travel, right? I'm Pacific time. If I travel to the East Coast, or when I was traveling to the East Coast, right, that can sort of tweak that circadian rhythm a little bit. People traveling from the East Coast over to Europe for business. If you're an avid traveler, there are times for it, right? If you're like super duper anxious about a presentation at work the next day, there are times for it. But as a prolonged supplement, no go, because we want our bodies to be naturally producing the levels of the hormones that we need. And by artificially, right, taking those, what we typically find for both adults and for children, because, you know, children and melatonin is a thing as well, sometimes by pediatrician, sometimes just by parent prescription or parent dosing, I guess. And what we find is helps with sleep onset, but then the night wake ups are brutal, because we're boosting up that melatonin level, but it depletes more quickly than if we allow our body to naturally produce melatonin and to sustain through a whole night. So you may give it to say you have a 4-year-old and you're like, I'm at my wit's end. I can't deal with this preschooler. He takes 3.5 hours to fall asleep and I have to lay there, yada, yada. I'm going to buy the gummy, whatever, melatonin vitamins, right? Take them. Oh my gosh, she fell asleep in 30 minutes. This was so magical. Yeah, until about 2:30 in the morning. And then it's not so magical anymore. And again, it's a hormone thing. So we would rather them be naturally occurring. We'd rather get the screens out of the way. We'd rather, use, if it's cloudy and yucky where you are, using a light box, getting outside for natural vitamin D and, and sunshine, keeping the shades open in your house during the day, doing some things a little bit more naturally than a supplement.
100% agree. I was happy. I knew you were going to say that, but
yeah, you're like, we didn't talk about this beforehand.
I knew you were going to say that anyways. But it's just like, and I talked in the group too this morning too, is like, do you want to fix the symptom or do you want to fix the problem?
Right.
Because if you take that melatonin, what other problems are you then creating? And then you just have a snowball effect. It's kind of like, if you take the pill, and I'm sure, I took it for so many years, probably like 15 years. My body didn't know how to freaking produce its own hormones. And the doctor's like, no, it's fine. You could do that for 15 years. That was probably, but you don't know. I didn't know back then. But anything prolonged use that does the job that your body should be naturally doing, again, ask yourself,
why? Is this the right thing for the,
let's see. Oh, eating before bed. Now I kind of see it and everything, right? Like some things might work for you and some things might not. Like for me, I can't eat before bed. Some people like a little snacky, whether it's out of habit or they just need it to sleep.
Right.
Do you find that a snack helps people sleep, or it kind of just gives them that glucose spike in the middle of the night and that's why they wake up?
Most of the time it's not necessary to have like a pre-bedtime snack for an adult. I had a client, she was like late 20s, extremely physically fit and really high metabolism. And she was waking hungry when we pulled the night feed, the bedtime snack. And so what we did is we just switched it out. So we changed it from what she had been having. And then we just went like high protein, high fat. So she would have like nuts and cheese, or she would have like an avocado, with some salt and pepper on it. Just like we went high fat, or high protein and tried to stay away from the carbs just to see if, and it helped quite a bit. The problem was then we introduced the food and then she was thirsty. So then she was drinking water to hydrate and then she was up to pee. So again, adjustments, and knowing that if you've been someone who has had a late night snack for years and years and years, pulling it one day probably isn't going to make a difference, right? We have to give our bodies time to adjust. We need to give our minds time to like get around that. And more often than not, I see and hear, I've tried everything, so far in 2021, sleep has been my main priority. So in the last 5 weeks, and I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of change in 5 weeks, but none of it was sustained, right? It was just like one night of this,
one night,
two tries of this. Yeah.
And for people that wake up in the middle of the night to pee, do you think it's, I'm sure if you drink a gallon of water before bed, sure, you're going to wake up. But sometimes I feel like people wake up and they think,
and then,
oh, I'll just go pee. So it's like, which one came first, having to pee or having to wake up? What do you think is like the biggest problem of like why people would wake up and don't have that continuous sleep?
So the important thing to sort of the misconception around sleep is that like we start sleeping and then we sleep and then we end sleeping, but it's really happening in cycles. And so it's the linkage of cycles together. And this is from newborns through adults, all ages, past about 4 months old. We all have the same sleep cycle. Newborns are a little different, but the beginning of every sleep cycle is really drowsy or dozing light sleep. And so when we complete through a cycle, it gets deeper and deeper, we get into REM. This is the simplified version, right? So drowsy, dozing, light sleep, deep sleep, REM. Then we're back to the top. Drowsy, dozing, light sleep, deep sleep, REM. And so it's exactly what you say, that I get through a cycle, then I get back to the drowsy dozing stage, and I realize my pillow is flat. My husband is snoring. I have to pee. My feet are cold, right? It's not that those things wake you up. It's that you get to the drowsy part of your cycle. It's really light, low quality sleep anyway. And your brain realizes, oh, wait, something here is amiss. So we're all connecting cycles all night long. It's a matter of, can you connect a cycle without knowing that you're awake? Or are you waking up and then you're having crazy thoughts? Are you waking up and you're hearing your husband snoring? Are you waking up and having to get up to pee? Are you waking up and scrolling your phone, feeding your baby, checking on the dog? What are you doing as you link cycles together?
So what would you say? I guess it's different for everybody depending upon their situation on how to link those cycles better.
So the first thing I always look at is the sleep onset. So most often for pediatrics and for adults, the way you fall asleep at sleep onset is the way your body's going to need or desire to connect again, connect again, connect again. So that's why if someone says like, I have to have the TV on to fall asleep. Well, then if you wake up in the middle of the night and the TV's off because you set like a sleep timer, your brain it recalls the most recent scenario. So it's going to recall back to, I needed the TV. So then you're probably are right that you need to turn the TV back on to get your brain to, power down so that you can, we know that the TV itself is not actually helpful. It's the pattern of what you needed to fall asleep. It's just like with an infant who has only ever fallen asleep while eating, right? Then in the middle of the night, before they can connect that cycle, they need that food source again, or they need that food source again, sort of as their prop. So it's really looking at the sleep onset, what we need to fall asleep, and then making that linkage of cycles a little bit easier. And I will say, mindset plays a huge role in this, because if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're frustrated, you're stressed, you're nervous, you're anxious, you look at your clock and you're counting backwards in your head the number of minutes left of sleep, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get yourself back to sleep, because then you start that spiral and you start to say to yourself, I'm not a good sleeper. I'm going to be so tired tomorrow. Oh my gosh, tomorrow's going to suck. How am I ever going to get through the day? I already know I need a nap. Right?
2 hours left to sleep. I only have two more
Oh,
hours.
the worst.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
And it does nothing for getting to sleep. So picking some sort of mantra, something like, my body's going to get the sleep that I need, or I know my body is able to get a full night's sleep. I know my body is going to supply me with enough energy tomorrow. Picking something like that, where yes, it's frustrating that you're awake, but we also have to trust that like we're going to fall asleep, as long as we're not beating ourselves up about not falling asleep.
Yeah. And you mentioned this too in the beginning of the call about like brain dumping.
Mm-hmm.
I do it in the morning, but even though I do it in the morning, when I wake up, I think it does help me fall asleep just because I'm getting all the crap out. And I hate writing. I'm not a writer. So for me, like when people would say, oh, just journal, I'm like, give me a freaking journal. Like, I don't do that. Like, I'm not like good with the words. But like when I tell people, just like put whatever is in your mind, like, Dave, be quiet. Like, you're making too much noise in the kitchen. Like, if I'm thinking that, that's what I'm
Write it.
writing down.
Yep.
So when I say like brain dump, that's when it like whatever is popping in your head, like even if it sounds ridiculously stupid and you're just saying the same things over and over,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like the point, right? It's just to get all that out of your head, and then you can hit your pillow a little bit less stressed out.
Yeah. And I would say that's especially true, like if you find yourself constantly thinking about like the grocery list or what you need to do tomorrow, or you don't want to forget the Valentine's for the Valentine's party, or like, especially if it's these promptings where your mind is telling you, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. That's putting your brain working at a a higher level. It's going to be harder to fall asleep because of the cognition level that you're at. And so if you're trying to not forget about the whatever almond flour you need from the store, write it down, like get it out of your brain, put it on paper, right? And I'm not saying like make a perfectly curated grocery list with like what aisle you're going to go down in what order. You don't need to think about it. Just get it out of here as like a stream of consciousness, like almond flour, Valentine's, babysitter, whatever it is, just write it down.
Yeah, just have a paper and pen notebook next to your
bed.
Sticky
note even. I love sticky note because then it's like brain dump, and then the next morning you just throw it away. It's just a dump. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. You're
not going to read it anyways.
You're not going to read it anyways. I think a lot of people are like turned off by the idea of a journal because they think like they have to have the perfect journal and the perfect pen and the perfect prompt and Like, what if you just, like you said, what if you just gave yourself permission to just write and then throw it away, or write and then never look at it again, or whatever it is?
I like that. I like that a lot. Do you have like maybe 5 more minutes for like 2 more questions?
Sure.
And we're going to switch over to maybe, do you mind if we ask like 2 kid questions?
Totally.
All right, cool. So Jennifer, she has 3.5-month old.
Okay.
On average, she's getting up about 5 times a night. Once in a blue moon, it will be 3 times a night. And I don't think she's really concerned about her kid getting up. She's more concerned about how she can fall back asleep quickly in between feedings.
The feeds.
Yeah. So she can be more alert during the day.
Yeah. So five fragments, right? So like maybe the first wake of your baby, you're still awake. Like maybe it's between like 9 and 10 and baby's gone to bed and you're still awake. So even then we'll call it 4 fragments of sleep. That's pretty fragmented sleep. So it's hard to feel rested with that many wakes. So my first tip would be, let's see if we can consolidate from 5 wakes to 3. And I know you said it's happened occasionally, so we know baby can do it. Because then if one of the wakes is before you go to bed, say they go to bed at 7:30 and their first wake up is at 10:30 and you're not asleep yet, okay, great. Then that gives you from 11 until morning with only 2 more wakes. So then you have 3 fragments of sleep as opposed to like 6. That's going to allow you to get better quality sleep because your sleep cycle is less likely to be chunked. It's when they get really chunky and fragmented that it feels like we barely even slept at all. So my first tip would be find a way to consolidate those feeds down to 3-ish. Ideally, one of them would be before you went to bed. And then my second tip, if you're not feeling like that's an attainable goal right now, would be to make sure that when you feed baby, that you're not scrolling on your phone, that you're not stimulating your own brain, that you're not like going in and turning on the lights and, doing all the things, because then it's going to make it harder for you to go back to sleep. And I know culturally in our society, it's like, I'm up feeding the baby, I'm going to scroll, I'm going to post, I'm going to engage in stories, I'm going to do all this stuff. Because
hell no, I never did that.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you.
I was like, I need sleep.
Yeah, but it does. It feels like it's, well, what else am I going to do? I might as well be doing this if I'm awake. But from a blue light perspective and from a brain stimulation perspective, my vote would be leave the phone where it is. If anything, listen to like a body scan so that you can be calming yourself before you hop back into bed.
And my sound machine had like the light to it, but I put it on the red. I forget. Does the red help?
Red is good. Yeah, red is good.
Yeah. So if like you're actually turning on lights, maybe try using a red light. That won't give you.
They actually even sell red night lights, like anything red or orange, or how there's that shade of white that's more yellow. I opt for those warmer colors as opposed to like the bluer white. Who knew white had so many colors?
Oh, it does. All right. So we're going to go up in kind of age to Jenna. She has a 4-year-old that has been an awful sleeper his entire life. They haven't used melatonin. They just try to exhaust him. What's your suggestion for changing sleep onset for the 4-year-old who has trouble falling asleep?
Yeah, great question. So I have a 4-year-old. So Jenna solidarity to you. I can't imagine a grouchy 4-year-old every day. So a few things with 4 that are tricky. Sometimes they're napping, sometimes they're not. So we need to look at that when we look at schedule. But I would say the most often a 4, anywhere between 3.5 and 5 years old, they're actually overtired. So if we're like trying to run them ragged, trying to get them outside, trying to run off their energy, they're not napping anymore, we're trying to push bedtime later, and more likely than not, they're past their prime. And just like with us, where we want to go to bed where our melatonin level is highest, which is why we're going to pull screens, we want our kiddos to go to bed when their melatonin level is highest. And what we know is that if melatonin level, if we don't hit it right, so let's say his ideal melatonin time would be 7 p.m. I'm just using this as an example, 7 p.m. And let's say we don't start bedtime until closer to 8. Anytime between 7 and 8, melatonin is already depleting because the body's like, okay, well, fine. You didn't need melatonin, then I guess I'm going to deplete. And instead, I'm going to start producing cortisol. Not a good combination. Low melatonin, high cortisol for a 4-year-old looks a lot like silliness, hyperactivity. They can be really like stall tactic, boundary pushing, a lot of game playing. Sometimes I equate this age to gamblers because they keep playing the slot machine because they don't know what's going to happen. Like, am I going to win? Am I going to lose? Am I going to get yelled at? Is mom going to give me a hug? Or are we going to read another book? What are we going to do? And so, I would really encourage you to look at the potential of overtiredness, because oftentimes our gut says, oh, well, last night was terrible going to bed, so let's push it a little later because I don't want to be up there for 3 hours. So I'm just going to like drag it later. We're going to like tire them out. Let's play like 50,000 rounds of Baby Shark and Simon Says and Red Light, Green Light and all the things. But probably, and without looking at specifics, I'm not sure, that melatonin level has already started to drop, cortisol starting to spike, and we're fighting an uphill battle.
Jenna just said, spot on. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I remember when I was working with Brittney with Parker, I don't even know how old he was because that like point in my life is
he was young. I think he was almost 4 months when we started.
I don't know. I can't remember anything at that point from that time era. Like it was early bedtime. And I'm like, well, I want him tired. And she's like, no. And I mean, even now, like some days he's in bed at like 6:30 and people like, are like, well, wow, he must wake up really early. I was like, hell no, I can wake up at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
It works.
It does.
Yeah.
It's why, and it's so like, Jenna, I want you to know that everybody has the same misconception. And I think it's because we just think like naturally, it seems like, oh, like they're not tired, we keep them up later. They're not tired, keep them up later. We're in the middle right now of Lincoln dropping his nap. And I know it's, you know, it has its pluses and minuses. I know it mostly makes me sad because I feel like he's like turning into a kid. Yeah. But I will say he goes to bed at 6 o'clock on the nights with no nap, and he sleeps until 7:30 when we leave for school. And like, I feel like a new woman. I'm like, whoa, what are we going to do tonight? Like, this is awesome.
That's so great. Last kid question from Dawn.
Okay.
Is my 2-year-old goes to bed about 7:30 and wakes up at 1:30. Wide awake, ready to start the day. Getting him back to sleep sometimes can take over an hour of sitting with him. Otherwise, he screams, and we are afraid of him waking his brothers. So it looks like we got 2 good sleepers and 1 screamer. 1 not so great. So what are your suggestions?
First of all, that's really tough because we obviously, worst case scenario would be multiple kids up in the middle of the night. And it's so incredibly hard at 1 a.m. to make any sort of like good decision, right? And oftentimes between partners, it means that like you want to do this and your husband wants to do this, and there's like conflict there. And then he's like, no, just bring him into bed. And you're like, no. So recognize that this is a tough situation to be in. So the first thing I would look at is sleep onset. So does he need you sitting with him to fall asleep? Because if he does, then in the middle of the night, when he's trying to link that cycle together, he's looking for that same thing. And what's most fair to him would be to set the expectation that you fall asleep on your own and then you connect on your own, or you fall asleep with us and you connect with us. I presume, because 1:30 in the morning is not a fun time to be awake, that you'd rather do the fall asleep on your own, connect on your own scenario. And so then finding something that feels like a plan you can stick with to really implement that sleep independence. 2 is a tough age for any sort of sleep teaching or sleep training because we have a few years of habits. Sounds like we have siblings at the house that we probably don't want to agitate or aggravate, even at bedtime. But so really finding something that you can stick with, because 2-year-olds smell fear. They know it's there. If you're going to waver, they're going to break you. That's what it means to be a toddler. They're coming into their independence. They're really, really pushing those boundaries. And it's hard cognitively to reason with them. So just find something that feels like a good fit for you. Get some help from, if you are his prop, get some help from somebody else to get him down those first 2 nights. It should go quicker than if it's with you. And then the other thing with 2 is we want to check timing. So we want to be sure that that midday nap is far enough from bedtime that we have enough buildup of sleep pressure, but we don't want it too far that we get back to Jenna's question with the overtiredness. So there really is a sweet spot. And at 2 years old, it's most often about 5 to 5.5 hours from when the nap ends to when bedtime begins ish. Without knowing your kiddo, I can't tell you exactly, but kind of around there. So look at that sleep onset. Is it independent or not? And then I would look at his schedule, and then like buckle down on consistency, because otherwise he's just going to push you.
Such great info. Man, you're so good, Brittney.
I love this. Like, I feel you're like, and the next question is from Dawn. And I'm like, oh, Dawn, what are we going to do today?
My last question, and this is just a question coming out of thin air, is that I've seen other sleeping whatever do, is like doing the lock from the outside, keeping their environment safe. Is that something you recommend at all, or at a certain point? I don't know why I'm asking this. I just wondered.
Yeah. So we prefer not to use it as a method. But there are points with toddlers, like especially when they're climbing out of their crib, they're not yet old enough to understand boundaries. They're like 2.5-ish, and they can't understand the door is closed, right? They just cognitively, that boundary doesn't exist for them yet. Boundary definition comes into play at about 3. So when kiddos transition from a crib to a bed prior to 3, it's where we see a lot of like cognitive dissonance, because they can't understand the lack of boundary, but they keep climbing out of their crib. And so it's there's a lot of friction there. And so it's safest to remove them from the crib so they're not like catapulting out, of course. And then sometimes that means like taking out furniture so they can't, accidentally pull something down onto them, or, play with plugs and things like that. There have been a few cases where we have to like pull out all the stops and remove light bulbs, because they really love to like dingle dangle with the light switch. And then suddenly it's 2:30 in the morning and you feel like you're at a rave because the light's just like on and off, on and off. We've had to remove those. We've had to switch the doorknob around before so that locks on the outside, like you're saying. It's not our favorite thing to do, but like if our choices are have a kid roaming in the hallway in the middle of the night when mom and dad are sleeping and risk like falling down the stairs, not ideal. Locking the door from the outside, also not ideal, but like, which is the lesser of the 2 evils?
Yeah. And what would you say is the earliest age to start sleep training?
So my favorite age, because I trained Lincoln when he was 8 weeks old, and I use train very loosely.
And I was going to ask you, do you call it sleep training? Because I know people hear sleep training and they're like,
yeah. No. So at that age, it's really like the proactive, like foundation of sleep. So it's like, parent education around wake windows and around sleep pressure and around overtiredness, and removing sleep props to like teach that independence.
Damn sleep.
Most people, when they think of it, they think of like Ferber, I'm going to shut the door. I'm going to cross my fingers till the morning. I'm not coming in. I'm not feeding you. I'm not. And that doesn't work for most families. If families were going to do that, they would just do it on their own. So by the time most people come to us, maybe they're expecting baby number 2 and baby number 1 was like a train wreck. So they want to be proactive and do things earlier. But really from prenatal onward, and just recognition that it's a skill that we can teach at any age. I've worked with like 50 to 60-year-old men. My oldest client, he was like late 60s and hadn't learned how to independently sleep without sleep aids, without prescription sleep medication. And it's a skill that you can learn at 6 weeks, that you can learn at 6 months, that you can learn at 6 years, that you can learn at 60 years, because it is very much habitually and behaviorally based.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the first things I learned from you, is that it is a skill and it is taught. And I mean, it's hard being a mom and like wanting to be the soother.
Yep.
And then you just get to a certain point where you're just like, we all know how important sleep is. When you don't have sleep, everything else just doesn't freaking work. It doesn't. And it's just like your health. If you don't have your health, nothing else seems to work. And obviously sleep is a part
right
of health. So Brittney, this was freaking so great. Thank you so much for hopping on with us. Brittney does do free consults. So if you are ever interested, I'm going to put her contact info into the group. Definitely reach out to her, even if you're like, you know what, I don't know, or whatever, like, heck, it's a free consult. Maybe she had a free consult with my neighbor and she's like, hey, you know what? I think you're on the right path. Keep going. If you hear hit a little snag, give me a call back.
Let me know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I love that she is a businesswoman, but she's honestly like, no, you don't need me. You're good.
Yeah, you're
but
close.
If you need help, like, she is there. And what I loved about the way that she helps is it is one-on-one. It's not, hey, watch this video and follow it. But wait, I have a question like 5 minutes in because my kid's already screaming. Or, hey, it's 10:30 and I'm not asleep yet. I did what else can I do? Like, she's there. It's called a Voxer app. And you just go back and forth with her. That's how personalized and one-on-one with it. And when I mean personalized, it's personalized. It's not just a format, but it's very specific to you. Just like with our health, not everything works for everybody. You have to find what works for you. And Brittney worked for us, so yay! So Brittney, thank you so much. Did you want to add any closing words?
No, thanks for having me. I could literally talk about sleep all day. So I really appreciate it, and I hope everybody gets some good sleep tonight. Turn off your devices.
Yeah, go to bed right now. Oh, and blue light glasses.
Yeah, the best.
See, blue light glasses. All right, thanks everyone. Have a good night. See you in the group.
Thanks, Rose. Bye.
Bye.